Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our history live group tutorial session today, this afternoon. Really great to see lots of you coming back for this session again. This is our second history session, so I'm really pleased to see lots of you joining us. It will be on the challenges to Elizabeth's rule, and I think if you were here for the last session, you know that we looked at religious settlement, but now we're looking at challenges to Elizabeth's rule. And this session will be led by our lovely tutor Yaz, who did the last history session for us. Yaz is studying international relations and modern history at the University of St Andrews, and she will be leading the session today. Always, as we say at the beginning, just remember that these sessions go for an hour long, with 45 minutes of the tutor delivering the content and then 15 minutes at the end for questions. The best way to send your questions through are using either the chat function or the Q&A function. The sessions are also all recorded. So if you've signed up to the My Tutor Online School, then you'll have a link that will tell you where to access this session afterwards if you'd like to watch it at another time. I'm just going to hand over to Yaz now to lead the session for us.
Hello everyone. If you were here last time, as just explained, we were doing the religious settlement, so hopefully you guys will remember that. And today we're going to be looking at challenges to Elizabeth's rule in 1558 specifically. So this is when she first came to the throne, and because she's a new monarch, there's quite a lot of challenge to her, and we'll be going through what they were and sort of how she overcame them today. But before we do that, we're just going to do a quick summary of the religious settlement, just so that if you were here last time, you can go over it. If you weren't, you get a quick summary and you can watch it on YouTube, as we just explained. So first things first, summary of the religious settlement. So the religious settlement was passed in 1559. There were religious differences between Catholics, Protestants and Puritans. Elizabeth faced challenges from Puritans and Catholics within England and from France and Spain abroad. Mary Queen of Scots was an alternative Catholic queen, and this threatened Elizabeth. And the main components of the religious settlement were the Act of Uniformity, which brought everything together, made church services the same across all of England, the Act of Supremacy, which made Elizabeth the supreme governor of the Church of England, the Book of Common Prayer, which laid out the wording of church services for the clergy, and the Royal Injunctions, which had a bunch of rules and regulations for the clergy to follow, and had stuff like banning pilgrimages to fake miracles and things like that as part of the Royal Injunctions as well. So that's just a quick summary of the religious settlement. Hopefully you'll need that, and this is not news. So that's that. Now on to what we're going to be looking at today. First up, government and society. So Elizabeth inherited a country of around 2.8 million people, and her first act as monarch was to set up a government to help her rule the country. On the slide, I've just laid out the main structure of government under Elizabeth. So the Queen had deciding power in government, but she could not pass laws or raise taxes without parliamentary approval, and that's really important. She hasn't got unlimited power. She does have to seek the approval of Parliament throughout her reign, and she is advised by the Privy Council and the Court. The Privy Council are members of the nobility who helped govern the country. Parliament advised Elizabeth's government, and they were made up of the House of Lords and the House of Commons. Parliament passed laws and approved taxes. The Lord Lieutenants were noblemen appointed by the government who governed English counties and raised the local militia. Militia are armies, little armies of local people who are sort of called to arms when the need strikes. So in civil war, you'd have militias, but in an international war, unless you really are desperate, it would be the main army. That's important. So that's the difference between like the army and the militia. Justices of the peace were large landowners appointed by government, and they were in charge of law and order locally. And finally, the court was made up of noblemen who acted as the monarch's advisors and friends. So that's the main structure of government under Elizabeth. So now we're going to have a look at society. So Elizabethan society. When Elizabeth came to the throne, the population was around 2.8 million. When of these, around 10% lived in towns and cities, and the remaining 90% lived in the countryside. London was by far the largest city, with a population of around 100,000 and counting, and it was home to many prosperous industry and individuals. People living in the countryside, especially the poorer people, typically lived as farmers, either selling their produce or growing just enough to feed themselves and their families. This is called subsistence, farming. I always trip over that word. Those living in towns and cities made their living in growing industries, so that's things like the wool and the cloth trade, and that was really important for trade with Antwerp in the Netherlands. And then you've got this issue of obedience and care. So everyone in Elizabethan society owed respect and obedience to those above them and had a duty to those below. Landowners took care of their tenants, especially during times of hardship, and households were run along similar lines to society. So the husband or father was head of the household, his wife, children, and any servants were then expected to be obedient to him, and they had a duty, and he had a duty to them. So they're obedient to the father, and then the father has a duty to protect and provide for his household. So I've just seen, can you write down some of the key terms? I'm not sure what key terms you mean. Hopefully they're explained in the PowerPoint. I think you might be referring to militia, on which I can do, but just let me know which terms you want me to write down as we go along. Okay, so what were the two bodies that, I've got a quiz question for you now. What were the two bodies that made up Parliament in Elizabethan England? What were the two bodies that made up Parliament in Elizabethan England? If you can all go onto the chat and put in what you think the answer is, just to check that I know that you know. So yes, I can see some of you starting to put your answers in. What are the two bodies that made up Parliament in Elizabethan England? So you should be coming up with two answers here. Yes, well done guys, you've got some good answers coming in. Excellent. Nail, Roundheads and Cavaliers, that's actually a bit later, so that's the English Civil War, which is in 1640s, I believe, off the top of my head. So this is 1558, so about 100 years later. But excellent English history knowledge. So House of Lords and House of Commons, yes. Everyone seems to have said that, which is good. So yes, they were the two bodies that made up Parliament, the House of Lords and the House of Commons, and they are the main two bodies that make up Parliament today. So in that sense, nothing has changed, but their powers have slightly changed. So yes, well done to everyone there. Okay, the Virgin Queen. This is probably a term that you've heard a lot about Elizabeth. It's probably the name that she's most famous for. So when Elizabeth became queen following the death of her older sister Mary, she had to find a way of establishing her authority as a reigning monarch. And she faced a lot of problems when she was establishing this. So Elizabeth's legitimacy was in doubt, as the Pope had refused to recognise her father, Henry VIII's marriage to her mother, Anne Boleyn. Catholics refused to acknowledge Elizabeth's right to rule England. As a result, the Pope had rejected her and her father's marriage to her mother. Elizabeth's government needed money, and it was unusual for a queen to rule in her own right. So people wanted Elizabeth to marry and provide the country with a male heir. However, she couldn't marry a Protestant, as it would anger Catholics, and she couldn't marry a Catholic because it would anger Protestants. So that puts her in a tricky situation to start with. And marriage could draw England into foreign wars, as the crown was in debt, and it was not feasible for Elizabeth to pay for foreign wars when the crown's in such big debt. She could not marry a foreign prince because she didn't want to get involved in foreign wars, but she also couldn't marry an English nobleman because showing favour to one noble family would incite anger from the others, and that would leave Elizabeth open to rebellion. So basically she's in a tricky situation marriage-wise, and that's where we get this idea of the Virgin Queen, because she's unmarried. So in those days, if you were unmarried, you were assumed to be a virgin. And finally, to pass laws, Elizabeth needed the support of Parliament. So she's got a lot of issues to face when she first comes to the throne. So what were the characteristics of the Virgin Queen? So Elizabeth was well educated and an intellectual. She was fluent in 6 languages, including French and Spanish, which made diplomacy much easier because she could speak to the French and Spanish kings and diplomats in French and Spanish. So they're going to like her a bit more because they don't have to translate into English, and it makes getting her point across a lot easier. She was a charismatic public speaker, so this enabled her to win over subjects and command support in Parliament. She was seen as indecisive on subjects including what to do with Mary Queen of Scots, which was to her detriment, but overall that indecision has reflected quite well on her throughout history, especially over the issue of Mary Queen of Scots, because it shows that she didn't want to kill firstly her cousin or another queen, and that worked in her favour basically. And Elizabeth was a Protestant, so Mary Tudor had led purges to remove Protestantism from England, where she burned 300 people, as we said last lesson, and Elizabeth was less radical in her approach. And finally, Elizabeth was unmarried and presented herself as the Virgin Queen married to the state, which gained her popularity for her devotion to England. So instead of marrying a man and giving up her power and her title and all of the sort of extra things that she gets from being queen and the devotion that she's able to provide to her subjects, by remaining married to the state, she's really showing, I'm not putting myself above you, you, the people, the state is my only devotion. So that ultimately works well in her favour, and she becomes very popular as a result. So we've got a quiz question now. What was one problem Elizabeth faced when she became queen? What was one problem that Elizabeth faced when she became queen? So you just need to write one problem. If you can think of more, go ahead. But if everyone could try and get one problem into the chat, that would be excellent. And then we can check that we're all on the same page. Excellent. She couldn't marry anyone. Legitimacy. Well done, guys. I've just got to grab my charger. Excellent. Her legitimacy. Yep. Well done, guys. So can anyone think of any other problems that she faced? Excellent. Government needed money. Well done. Legitimacy. Yeah. She was a Protestant. Excellent. Mary Queen of Scots. Excellent. She was a female. Excellent. She couldn't display a singular religion. Excellent. This is all really good stuff, guys. Debt. Excellent. Female. She couldn't have children. Excellent. These are all brilliant answers. So well done, guys. The other things that you could have talked about, so we've got legitimacy and marriage. You could have talked about France, the Catholics, and also Parliament. So with Parliament, that's the one that you're probably most confused about, if you're confused at all, is that she can't, she needs their support, basically. She can't do what she wants. She needs to have Parliament on side. So that's an issue when she first comes to the throne. It's something that she's got to do. She's got to make sure that they are friendly to her, basically, and the laws that she wants to pass. So that is a quick summary of the Virgin Queen and her characteristics and the problems that she faced. So we're going to look deeper now at the challenges at home and abroad. So financial weakness. The crown was £300,000 in debt, and that doesn't sound very much, but that would be about £120 million today. So that is a lot of debt, and that's putting her in a bad position because she doesn't have the power to defend her country against foreign invasion. She doesn't have the power to, she doesn't have the money even to ensure that she can defend herself against revolt, stuff like that. She can't have a proper reform program or anything because she doesn't have the money to finance it. So Mary Tudor had sold off crown lands to pay for wars with France, so there was less income from rents. Since the 1540s, the crown had devalued the coinage by reducing its gold and silver content, so this resulted in inflation, which is not good, and the war with France seemed ever more likely, but the crown had no money to go to war. So even though France is advancing, they've got Mary Queen of Scots, they've got the old alliance through the marriage of Mary Queen of Scots to Francis II, it seems ever more likely, and especially she's a Protestant queen and they in France are Catholics, it does seem that they're going to be going to war. But she doesn't have the money to fund a war. So this puts Elizabeth in a very difficult position. So we're now going to look a little bit more at the French threat. Mary, Queen of Scots, was married to the heir of the French throne, Francis II. Mary had a strong claim to the English throne through her mother, Margaret Tudor, so that's Elizabeth's aunt, and she was supported by Catholics. The old alliance was France's alliance with Scotland, and it threatened England. So Mary of Guise, James V's widow, who ruled Scotland on behalf of her daughter, Mary Queen of Scots, kept French soldiers in Scotland who could attack England. They're all on the same island, so they're very close. That's a very real threat. And the relationship between France and Scotland was further strengthened by the marriage of Francis II to Mary Queen of Scots in 1559. So just 1 year into Elizabeth's reign, she's got this massive marriage alliance between two of her biggest and closest rivals. That puts her in a very bad position. Elizabeth was also under pressure to retake Calais, which was England's last territory in mainland Europe from France. It had been lost under the Treaty of Cateau-Cambrésis, which was in 1558 under Mary Tudor, and war with France would be dangerous and expensive. So they've just come out of a war with France in 1558, and now France is making moves to start war again. And Elizabeth is very nervous about this, as are her Privy Council and her government. So that's something that she's got to overcome. And then Spain and France had ended their war. So Spain and France had previously been in war with each other, and while they're fighting each other, they don't really focus on England, they just focus on defending themselves from each other. But when they have their alliance, they finish fighting, then both of them sort of turn their heads to England as the next big person to start a war with, basically. The next big grievances with England. In addition, they could unite against England as both countries were Catholic, and Spanish troops in the Spanish Netherlands were close to England, and they posed a very serious threat. So basically, Elizabeth is not in a very good position, sort of international relations wise. I've just seen a question, so is Mary the cause of this? Mary isn't the cause of it, but she could be something that's strengthening the French resolve. The fact that she's a Catholic is going to be very appealing to both the Spanish and the French, but particularly the French. Is Mary a figurehead? She is sort of a figurehead. They would rather have a king on the throne, a Catholic king on the throne, but because they don't have that option, they've got to sort of settle for Mary. So she is a figurehead in that sense. And when the marriage between Elizabeth and Mary and Francis ends, because Francis dies, France do sort of leave Mary in the lurch a little bit, so they're only really buddy mates with Mary while she's their queen. Obviously the old alliance remains, but they're less close. So she's sort of a figurehead. They would just use anyone who was a Catholic, really, so it's not really Mary's own attributes that they're going for, and they think that because she's a Catholic, she'll set out this Catholic regime, which is what they ultimately want. So yeah, she sort of is, but I wouldn't say that in an exam answer. So that's the French threat. How did she deal with the challenges of 1558 then? So she sought to avoid war with France by signing the Treaty of Troyes in 1564, which recognized once and for all that the French had a claim to Calais and England had to give this up, so they had to surrender Calais to France indefinitely. And so they've lost all of their territory now in mainland Europe. Elizabeth was able to deal with the threat posed by Scotland by placing Mary Queen of Scots in custody in England when she fled from an uprising in Scotland in 1568. So the remaining foreign threat now came from Spain, which was more manageable. So in 1568, just to give you some background here, Mary had to flee Scotland because the Scots turned against her. So she has been rejected by Scotland, basically, and then she comes to England, and instead of killing her, Elizabeth puts her under house arrest. and so she's sort of dealing with that. She doesn't kill her outright, because to kill a queen and to kill her cousin would look really bad, but she puts her under house arrest, where she is watched all the time so that she can't be part of any uprisings, part of any plots. But she's no longer the queen in Scotland. It's her son, who is a baby, so he's not a massive threat anymore. So that sort of reduces the Scottish threat, and then also the French threat as a result, because they're closely linked. And then, as I just said, it's back to Spain. So it's only, instead of the threat coming from 3 places, now it's coming from 1. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So she sold the crown lands and cut her own expenses so that she didn't have to raise taxes or debase the currency and anger her people. She managed to raise £120,000 from the sale of crown lands, which is almost half of the debt. And by 1574, the crown was out of debt for the first time since 1558. So she is ultimately successful in overcoming her financial problems. It takes her about 15 years, but she does do it, which is definitely a tick in her favour. And finally, the religious settlement of 1559 managed to appease the majority of Catholics and Protestants to reduce religious divisions in England. So there's no longer this threat of rebellion or civil war between the 2 religious factions, because it's sort of calmed down now that we've got this religious settlement, as we sort of covered in the last lesson. It's ultimately quite successful. Most people agree with it. So that's another success for Elizabeth. I've got another quiz question here. What was the crown debt in 1558? I've seen some of you have already answered it, but if all of you could now get on that, that would be excellent. What was the crown debt in 1558? I'll just get your answers in. I'll give you a few more seconds. Just gone through this. So hopefully you should all know, which is good. Excellent. Just getting your answers in. Okay, excellent. Some of you have got a more specific figure than I had, so well done. You can round it up in the exam. They won't penalise you because you've got close enough. I've seen some of you have put what it would be in today's money. That's really good that you know that, just for your own self. For scale, you also wouldn't need to put that in the exam because you wouldn't need that level of detail. It's just sort of so that you personally know how much that is, because I know that 300,000 doesn't sound like very much in the grand scheme of things, but then when you adjust it for inflation and stuff, it is quite a lot. So if you put 300,000 or 227,000, which is more accurate, then both of those were right, so well done. If you are in the exam and you forget that it's 227,000, you can say it's 300,000 because they're not going to penalise you for that. Okay, so well done there. Moving on, we will now go through a quick summary of everything that we've gone through. So Elizabeth became queen in 1558 following the death of Mary Tudor. She was faced with issues of legitimacy and concerns about her unmarried status. Elizabeth proved to be a charismatic and intellectual leader. The Queen, advised by the Privy Council, was very powerful, although she could not pass laws or raise taxes without Parliament's permission. And England had a population of around 2.8 million. Roughly 10% lived in cities and towns, and 90% lived in the countryside. So that's a quick summary of the first half. Then Elizabeth inherited a country that was £300,000 in debt. Over her reign, she sold off crown lands and reduced her expenses to pay off the debt. And tensions between England and France were high at the beginning of her reign. She officially surrendered Calais to France to avoid war, and this sort of quelled those tensions.
Yasmin,
I've just joined.
sorry, I was just about to read that out as well and say to Declan, if you've just joined, don't worry, this session is recorded, so you'll be able to catch the beginning half afterwards, and if you kind of just join in from now on, then that would be great.
Yeah, excellent. So hopefully you've got a couple of seconds now just to read through the summary so you can get involved in the next part, which is some more interactive activities. If you don't know the answers, then don't worry, because you can watch this back later. Excellent. So on to a sort of quiz. All right, this is a true or false quiz. So what I would like you to do is to tell me, is this statement true or false? True or false? There are 5 of these questions, just so you know. They should all be stuff that we've gone through today, so you should be able to do them quite easily, but yes. So most of you seem to have got the right answer there. Excellent. So the answer is false. Elizabeth came to the throne in 1558, as I've just seen one of you have put in, so well done. Excellent. Declan, you just need to text excellent into the little chat box. Okay, so next question. Mary Queen of Scots was married to the French king. Is this true or false? True or false? Mary Queen of Scots was married to the French king. Okay, yep, I can see lots of answers coming in. So this one was true. So well done if you put that. She was married to King Francis II of France. Third question. Elizabeth did not have the power to pass laws. Is this true or false? Elizabeth did not have the power to pass laws. True or false? Excellent. Well done, guys. Keep your answers coming in. Excellent. So Elizabeth did not have the power to pass laws. Okay, this one seems to have divided you a little bit more. The answer was true. Laws could only be passed by Parliament. So if you had that, well done. Laws can only be passed by Parliament. So she needs the Parliament basically to get anything done. She needs to make sure that they're on side, that they are sort of behind her agenda as well. So yeah, well done. Okay. Next question. The population of England was 2.9 million in 1558. The population of England was 2.9 million in 1558. Is this true or false? True or false? Just give you a couple more seconds to get your answers in. I've seen some of you are putting T or F. If that means that you can answer it a bit quicker, absolutely go ahead and do that. You have to write out true or false. Excellent. So most of you seem to have got the right answer. Excellent. It was false. The population of England was 2.8 million, 10% in the towns and cities and 90% in the countryside. So final statement. Elizabeth increased taxes to pay off crown debt. Elizabeth increased taxes to pay off crown debt. Is this true or false? Elizabeth increased taxes to pay off crown debt. Excellent. See all your answers coming in. Well done. So yes, all of you seem to have got the right answer there. False. She sold off crown lands and reduced her own expenditure. As one of you said, she didn't want to be unpopular by increasing taxes, so she sort of managed the financial situation herself, which increased her popularity. So well done if you got all of those right. If you didn't, maybe watch this through again, check through your revision notes. Some of them were meant to catch you out a little bit, so don't worry if you got them wrong. Just make sure you make a note of it so you know for next time. Okay, so now I'm sure your favourite bit of the lesson, we're going to go through some exam questions. So for exam questions, the most common exam questions for this topic will be related to the threat to Elizabeth when she became queen. This does not mean that they are the only questions you could get, but if you do know the threats, you'll be able to use that knowledge in other questions as well, for this topic, and actually for some of the other topics as well, because it's quite transient, it goes through the whole topic. So you could get any question in the Elizabeth paper on this topic. You can get a 4 mark, a 12 mark or a 16 mark question. It's quite versatile and they like to use it quite a lot. So this is an example of a 4 mark question. Describe of threats facing Elizabeth when she came to the throne in 1558. So what I would like you to do now is just to think about what 2 features you want to write about. Don't type it, just type it into the chat box, but don't send it yet, because that way everyone has some time to think about what they would include. So think about what 2 features you would write about. So you need to come up with 2 features. I'm just going to give you some time now to do that, but don't send in your answers yet. So this is all stuff that we've covered today, and actually some of it also in the last lesson. So excellent. So if you could all now send your answers in, that would be brilliant, so that we can see what you guys have all got. Okay, so what have you got? Okay, excellent. So Jess has said France and Spain, who were Catholic and could go against Protestant England as they weren't at war now. Maybe also Scotland and financial problems. The crown was heavily in debt. Excellent. We've got invasion. She wasn't executed because she was a woman. Excellent. What other ones have we got? Mary Queen of Scots being married to a French king was a threat, and there were questions of legitimacy. Excellent. Good job, guys. Still really good. Okay, I'm just going to move this up. Okay, so what have we got? So legitimacy. You're going to have to excuse my awful spelling. Spelling not my strong point. Religion and the crown debt. Yeah. So that one came from Helen. Excellent. That was a really good one from Jess as well. So well done for that, Jess. On to all of you, actually. You've all got really good ones in here. Yep, excellent. Okay, what else have we got? She wasn't accepted because she was a woman and she did not marry. Mary Queen of Scots. Yep, bad harvests. A bit rogue, but I like it. Yeah, excellent. Just going to take Lauren's one as well. So, as you can see, got some really good answers here. So, going through them in order, we've got Helen's answer first of all. So, her legitimacy, her religion, and the crown debt. Well done, Helen. You've identified 3 really key ones here, actually. So, her legitimacy, obviously, because of the fact that Henry VIII went against the Pope to marry her mother. Her religion, she was a Protestant in a Catholic country, and the crown debt, which was a massive issue that was left by her sister Mary Tudor and was something that she had to overcome in order to rule appropriately. So well done there, Helen. Jess has given a good answer where she sort of explains it a bit more, which is good. That's sort of more an exam answer. I know I didn't ask you to do an exam answer, so don't worry, but that's really good. So France and Spain, who were Catholic, could go against Protestant England as they weren't at war now, maybe also Scotland, and then financial problems, the crown was heavily in debt. Excellent. If those 2 were answers to, if you'd written them up in an exam, they would both do really well. They're 2 marks each, so well done. And Mary Queen of Scots being married to a French king was a threat. Excellent. And there were questions of legitimacy. Again, an excellent point. One of you has mentioned bad harvests. You wouldn't actually get marks for that in an exam question. They would credit you maybe 1 mark, but because it wasn't the main features of the threats facing Elizabeth when she came to the throne in 1558, you wouldn't be able to get full marks for that. But it was a really good one, so well done. Just make sure you stick to the sort of main 5, the main 5 points, which were, we'll just move on the slide. So legitimacy, marriage, Catholics, Parliament and France. If you know these 5 things, you will breeze through the challenges to Elizabeth's rule in 1558 questions, just because they're the main 5 things. And if you can talk about each one of these 5 things, you will definitely make sure that you're in good stead for answering these exam questions. So well done to all of you, because you all got something along those lines, which is excellent. Yes, well done. So we're now going to look at some student answers to this question. These aren't your answers, even though your answers were excellent. These are some sort of exemplar answers. So this is a best feature exercise. So answering the same question, I've got 3 features here. I'm just going to read them out to you, and then we will go through and decide which one is the best. So feature 1, one feature of threats facing Elizabeth was from the theatre. Lots of people went to the theatre and they could all see plays. When people were seeing plays, they were not at work, so the economy is not able to survive. Feature 2, threats facing Elizabeth when she came to the throne were often related to religion. As a Protestant queen, she needed to compromise between the Catholics, Protestants and Puritans with her religious settlement in 1559. This is because she wanted to avoid an uprising from Catholic nobles in the north. Feature 3, one of the threats facing Elizabeth was the threat of foreign invasion. The Spanish Armada was a massive threat and it made Elizabeth vulnerable. So those are the 3 features. Which one of these features do you think is the best answer? Which one of these 3 features do you think is the best answer? If you were the examiner and you were going through these, which one do you think is the best? Just a reminder, to gain 2 marks for a feature in a 4-mark question, you need to identify a feature correctly and then explain it. So you need to identify a feature correctly and then explain it. Which one of these features do you think has done that the best? Feature 1, 2, or 3? I can see you all putting them in, which is excellent. A lot of you have said the second feature. Jess has gone on for a more detailed explanation. Feature 2, because feature 1 wasn't particularly major, and feature 3 contained the Spanish Armada, which wasn't in 1558, so wasn't actually a threat then. Excellent. Second one, good job. Feature mentions all the main features and explain it with quality and detail. Thank you. Excellent. So well done if you wrote feature 2. If you didn't manage to get it in but you were thinking it, well done. So feature 1 is not the best because it's actually completely irrelevant. The theatre was not a threat to Elizabeth, and people going to the theatre would not have caused the English economy to collapse. So first of all, they've identified the wrong feature, it's not relevant, and then the explanation was also not right. So that is 0 marks there. Feature 3, they've actually identified an excellent point, foreign invasion, so they would have got a mark for that. But the question is asking you for threats in 1558, and the Spanish Armada was in 1588, so 30 years later, and it's not a threat when she came to the throne, as Jess just said. So yeah, they would get 1 mark for that because they've identified the correct feature, but then their explanation is wrong. So by process of elimination, feature 2 is the best answer. It identifies a good point about religious threats, and then it goes on to explain the threat very well in quite a lot of detail. So yeah, as a lot of you identified, feature 2 is the best answer here, and that is the kind of answer that you guys should all be aiming for. So I've got some revision tips. For those of you who are in the last lesson, these will look the same, but it's because for this topic they are largely the same. So make a cheat sheet with all your key dates, names, facts, figures. So you want the crown debt, you want how much she reduced it by, the dates that she did that, the dates of all the treaties, things like that. That's all stuff that you want to go through your notes and write down in a cheat sheet, just so that it's easy for you to, you can put it up somewhere in your house, like on your fridge, by your front door, somewhere that you're going to see it all the time, on your wardrobe door maybe. So you can keep going through them all the time, and also it just makes it easier for when you're coming to revision, you've got them all in one place, and hopefully you know the answers all really well. Bubble maps for government and society, the Virgin Queen, challenges at home and challenges abroad. Those are your 4 main topics, 4 challenges to Elizabeth's rule, and if you know them, you're going to do really well. I would also say when you're looking at challenges to her rule, make sure that you're including detailed notes on legitimacy, marriage, Catholics, Parliament and France, because if you know them, like I said earlier, you're going to do really well. And practice using past paper questions, so time yourself, make sure that you can do it within your time limits for each question, or you can write model answers, so looking at your notes, writing perfect model answers, and then that way you know that you can do it in the exam. When you get in there, if you start to panic, you can just think, no, I've done this before, I know what I'm doing. And also by writing out model answers, chances are you're going to remember the old sentence or the structure that you used, and that'll be really helpful when you come to the exam, especially if you panic in exams or your mind goes blank. Doing stuff like that is definitely going to help you. So those are my main revision tips. And just before I end today, I've got a quick 5-question quiz for you all to do. So, what year did Elizabeth become queen? What year did Elizabeth become queen? So this is right at the beginning. Hopefully you should all get this. Excellent. I think you've all got that, to be honest. It's quite an easy one to start us off with. Excellent. So the answer was 1558. So well done to all of you who got that. If you didn't have time to get your answer in, sorry about that. But well done if you got it. Excellent. If you didn't, write it down. Second question, who was her predecessor? Who was her predecessor? Excellent. Some of you got your questions in. Who was her predecessor? So who came before her? Who was on the throne before Elizabeth? Extra points if you can tell me what her relation to Elizabeth was. What her relation was. Well done to everyone who's got the right answer. Well done. Excellent. So some of you have gone really specific with half sister, which is actually 100% correct. Excellent. Yeah. So it was Mary Tudor, and she was the half sister of Elizabeth through her father, as some of you have explained. So well done there. Also, some of you mentioned that her nickname was Bloody Mary. That was excellent. If you can get that into a question, that is going to be excellent for like brownie points with the examiners, because they know that you really know your stuff and you know a bit of background to the Elizabethan period as well. Excellent. So what was the crown debt in 1558? What was the crown debt in 1558? Excellent. I can see you all getting your answers in. Well done. Excellent. Brilliant. Good job, guys. So the crown debt, the answer that I've got is £300,000. But if you wrote £227,000, that's just more specific, so well done. The £300,000 figure is the one that comes from the official revision guide. So I would stick with that as a baseline, but if you put in 227,000 in the exam, they're not going to penalise you for that. Excellent. So if you put in that it was £120 million, again, if you put that in the exam, you don't need to. That's just so that you guys know sort of how much it is in today's standards, so that you can see how much it is. Excellent. So who was the Virgin Queen? I can see some of you have started to answer already. It's sort of a trick question. Excellent. Some of you have given some explanations as well, which is really good, because that means that you understand, which is excellent. So yes, it is Elizabeth I. And as some of you have already said, it's because she was married to the state. Excellent. So final question, how many languages did Elizabeth speak? How many languages did Elizabeth speak? If you Google this, you'll get a lot of different answers, because no one 100% knows, but there is a standard answer for how many languages that she spoke that's sort of agreed on by most top historians, as we can definitely prove that she spoke these languages. Yes, so how many languages did Elizabeth speak? This is a bit of a rogue question, but if you're all paying attention at the beginning, you should all get this. Excellent. So she spoke 6 languages, including Spanish and French. She also spoke Italian and Latin. So she was a very skilled linguist. Normally languages were something that only boys were taught, so the fact that she was good at languages really shows how clever she was, and the fact she picked them up was really good. She also studied rhetoric, which is the study of argument and persuasion, so that's why she was a good speech maker as well. And basically she was a really good student, and you can show that through the languages that she speaks, and they all helped in her diplomacy. Excellent. So if you got all of those right, well done. If you didn't, jot them down now, because they're on the screen, or come back to this later. But if you know the answers to these questions, and also the questions that I was giving you throughout the lesson, then well done. You're going to be in really good stead for the exam, because they're good, like, quick knowledge. But yes, that is everything from me today. So do you have any questions? I've just seen one, wasn't Latin considered a dead language? Not in the 16th century, it was still used for church services and stuff like that. So it wasn't a dead language yet. It's dead now because no one speaks it, but in the 16th century it was very much alive. Are there any other questions about anything that we've done today? Who were William Cecil, Robert Dudley and Walsingham? So Cecil was one of her advisors. Robert Dudley was another close advisor, and also he led some of her armies against the Spanish Armada. And there were rumours that they were lovers, but obviously there's no proof of that, it's just rumours. And Walsingham was her spy master. So Elizabeth had loads of spies, and there were lots of plots and revolts against her, so she needed to make sure that she had an ear to the ground to check of any uprisings against her, and the person who was in charge of that was Walsingham. But yes, they're all key people in Elizabethan history. Was Shakespeare around that time? Yes, Shakespeare really sort of comes to the fore under Elizabeth. She was the queen when he was writing most of his plays, so yeah, this is the right period. In the leisure and theatre topic, we'll go through the Globe and Shakespeare as well, so that's all coming later. Yes, she did use him from the Babington plot. Okay, are there any other questions today to this topic? Just see if there are any other ones in there. Okay, that looks like that's everything. So was execution used as the death sentence process? Execution was used, it depends on the crime. So for treason it would be execution. For theft, for example, it was hanging. So it really depended on the crime. So Mary Queen of Scots was executed, she was beheaded. But it depends what the crime was to how you were executed, and it wasn't necessarily used for all crimes, it depended what it was. So it was a cruel consequence system then. I don't think that we can judge people in the past by our own standards, but I guess by our own standards that is cruel, but it was quite common in those days, and so no one would have thought that's unjustly cruel. It would have just thought that's normal. But yes, relative to today, it is. Excellent. So I think that's everything for today. But yes, well done to everyone for all of your answers today. They've all been really good. Some of you've gone into excellent detail, and yeah, it's been a pleasure teaching you all today.
Thanks everybody, and thank you Yaz as well. This has been recorded, so those of you who joined this a bit late, don't worry, you'll be able to access it later. And if you're sticking around, then I'll see you at 3:15 today for biology. Thanks everybody, bye.
Thank you.